So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar as part of our Maryland Clean Energy Capacity Building Program. For any new attendees, my name is Madeline McCullough, and I am the Policy Program Manager at the National Housing Trust. I know my audio is getting a little wonky on Zoom, so if I start to go quiet, I'm only talking for another minute or two, so you won't have to hear me and deal with that inconvenience for much longer. But just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We're asking participants to stay on mute during the presentation portion of the webinar. We'll have Q&A at the end, but you all are more than welcome at any point to put questions in the chat, and our presenters may respond to those live as they're coming through or save them to the end of their presentation. We're also going to be recording this webinar, so totally understand if folks are more comfortable staying off camera. But I will send out a session recording and slide deck afterwards for you all to have for reference and review and share with your team. So today's webinar is focused on our program's technical assistance tracks. As part of the capacity building program, we're partnering with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, or SAHF, and New Ecology to offer free one-on-one technical assistance to our participants. In a moment, you're going to hear from Lauren Westmoreland, who's the Vice President of Energy and Sustainability at SAFE, and Rebecca Arnold, the Project Manager at New Ecology, who will walk through their respective TA tracks in more detail, including timeline, scope of work, final deliverables, and next steps. But as a quick refresher, or in case you weren't able to join us at the in-person kickoff last month, our capacity building program consists of 3 program tracks and 1 ad hoc track. Track 2 and track 3 both include one-on-one technical assistance for free, led by New Ecology and SAFE. Track 2 TA is focused on portfolio-wide assistance to help participants create a roadmap to achieve time-bound clean energy targets for their portfolio. And track 3 TA includes one-on-one assistance to create preliminary clean energy scopes of work at up to 2 properties in the participant's portfolio. And our ad hoc track is for developers who have BEPS covered buildings in their portfolio, but who aren't participating in the broader webinar series or receiving TA. Our third webinar, which will be offered in 2 weeks, is just focused on BEPS, and that'll be open to just a larger Maryland attendee list for anyone who has covered buildings or just wants to learn more. Everyone is automatically opted into track 1 if you filled out that initial registration survey, which you all did if you were here today. Which just includes webinar series, but you have to indicate if you want to participate in track 2, track 3, or all of the tracks. And we'll circle back on how you can opt into your preferred track later on, or if you want to change the response that you indicated on that post-kickoff survey after the presentations. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren, who is going to walk us through track 2, portfolio-wide TA.
Thanks, Madeline. And before I get started, I want to introduce my colleague, Alex. Alex, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Shara. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Manager at SAFE.
And Alex and I will be working together to do the track 2 TA. If you can move to the next slide, Madeline. So as you all may remember, SAFE, we have 13 nonprofit affordable housing providers, including Homes for America, who's on this call. And we've been doing TA like this we've done it for SAFE members, we've done it for some NeighborWorks members in the past, we've done it for Housing Partnership Network members, and also for those who have participated in the DOE Better Buildings and Better Climate Challenge. So it's something that we like to do, we enjoy doing, and we're also really flexible because we recognize everyone is a little bit different in what they need and where they're going. So that's why I wanted to sort of start out with this sort of where are you trying to go? What's your starting point of where you're at to move forward and wherever your journey is taking you? It could be any one or all of the following things and anything in between. It could be really around benchmarking. We have been supporting our members for a long time on benchmarking and reviewing data, helping understand what looks like it's correct, what's not, and gathering up that information and setting it up. We also can help you define your carbon emissions baseline across your portfolio. We have tools in order to do that, and we can help you look over, a course of a couple of years to see what your trajectory is and sort of where you're at now, and where you were at maybe a year or two ago. We also can roadmap. So, once you know your emissions, or if you already know them, where do you want to go and how fast do you want to get there? Are you looking to decrease your emissions across your whole portfolio, just across your BEPS properties, whatever it is? We can work with you around that. And then if you do those first couple of things, we can help you get down to a prioritized property list. What properties should you start with first? If you have like four BEPS properties, like, do you want to do track three for all of them? Or do you want to start with one and sort of figure out where you're going? Do you want to start with an energy audit for all of them, or do you want to start with one or two, and why might that be? Also, we can help around knowledge sharing. So if you just have a bunch of questions that, these webinars are bringing up, we can talk with you about that. And we can, make sure that you have the information you need. What's happening at the federal level? We have a GRP project. What's going on with that? Who is doing what and what does that look like? We can help you just answer that. And then connection and peer exchange. So obviously, we're doing a lot of peer exchange and connection through this webinar series. And in addition, we know that there are across like the mid-Atlantic, there are other things happening in other places, and we can help you connect as necessary or as interested with others who are doing this work, maybe outside of just Maryland. And we can also support, like, if it's not technical assistance, that sort of falls into like what us or New Ecology is doing in track three, we can help you guys find what you need in that regard. Madeline, if you can go to the next slide, please. So here's the basics of what this kind of looks like in practice. We can offer up to 10 hours of technical assistance through late fall of this year. This could be 10 meetings where we just talk with you about things and sort of help you get sorted, which is unlikely based on just like, I know everyone's schedules is really busy. Or it can be fewer meetings with support that we're providing behind the scenes, gathering up information, reviewing your data, assembling things, working through our tools for you, whatever that looks like. We'll meet virtually, and we typically host a kickoff call to lay out your goals for TA. It can be anything on that list, and we can sort of piecemeal it together and come up with a plan for you. For that first meeting, we really recommend bringing more than one person from your organization. We found it to be really effective when you have someone from both asset management and development. If there's someone in leadership who sort of, needs to hear what's going on and help sort of streamline those things. And then if you have anyone who's been maybe thinking about sustainability or energy or managing some of the data associated with it, those folks are good to have on the call as well. And what we found through doing that is everyone learns a little bit of more of what the organization is doing, including often you're doing more than you realized that you thought you were doing, and that's helpful for everyone to hear. And again, like I mentioned, this is not a one size fits all, because we know that every organization is starting in a different place. And it's like that is luckily the flexibility that we can offer because it's just how we work with our members. Great, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so what are the SAFE tools? Just to give you a preview of what we can potentially do with you if you'd like to get into the weeds of understanding your carbon emissions, and then creating a roadmap of how to reduce those emissions. It's the same, energy also plays into this too. So let's move to the next slide. So we have worked with a group of folks out there to develop these tools. We had us, Bright Power, BEIC, which is a program implementer of energy efficiency programs and just a great technical consultant, and then the Housing Partnership Network. In addition, we piloted these tools with 4 SAFE members and 3 HPN members, and then since then we've had several other affordable housers who we've worked with to make sure these tools are appropriate for the affordable housing sector. Let's move to the next slide. So how do these tools work together? So the Safe Carbon Calculator is going to give you your annual carbon emissions data. You can do it for every year from 2024 all the way back to 2017. And it helps you understand it helps you understand what's going on with your benchmarking, to make sure things are properly accounted for, and then just like helps you understand, where you are in total. And then we have the carbon roadmap where it takes that annual data and it helps you project out into the future, how you get to reducing those emissions, reducing that energy usage. It allows you to play around with like, if I do a deep energy retrofit on like two of my properties, how much does that reduce my energy and emissions? If I replace like, my current like gas-fired water heaters with, heat pump water heaters, how does that impact my emissions and energy usage? All of those things and everything in between. And as you can see, the goal is that these tools then help you think about how to comply with any voluntary programs and obviously those mandates that you have out there. We can go to the next slide. So the tools, they look at scope one emissions, which is specifically focused on the fossil fuels that are burned in a building. Um, in other parts of the country, we typically look at scope two emissions because often there is the requirement to not just reduce your fossil fuel usage, but also reduce your electricity usage as well. And scope two is really like you don't have any direct emissions on your site from using electricity, but there are emissions produced when you create electricity that you're using at your building. As an example, I'm down here in Georgia, and right now about half of my power comes from natural gas or still coal. So knowing like how much emissions are being burned, and the more you reduce that electricity usage, the less likely you're going to be burning those fossil fuels from that perspective. With that all said, we can still look at it if you're interested. However, BEPS does not require you to track or reduce your electricity usage in order to reduce your emissions. Right now, they're really clearly only worrying about that scope one, which is your fossil fuels burned on site. So we're too going to make sure that as we work through these tools with you, that you have an understanding of that scope one emissions. If, from a standpoint of sort of like ESG or anything else that you may be thinking of to report to investors or otherwise, like we can help you think about scope two, and we're easily set up to do that. All right, let's move to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what we need to do the work within the calculator, and if it's something that's on your mind of what you want to do, what you're going to have to bring to the table. Let's go to the next slide. So first of all, we started doing these tools, and our initial thought was that when we were building this, we would only do buildings that had whole building data. But then when we were talking with our members, they're like, no, 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 we want to have an understanding of our full portfolio. Like if we're eventually going to get to the point where we need to reduce emissions across our portfolio, like we can't just do it where we have good data. We need to think about it across all buildings. With that said, we understand that data is still a problem. We know that Maryland has put some mandates in place to make utilities give you this data. We know that it's going to take a while and that data issues are still pervasive, and you might not yet, based on the conversation we had last time about benchmarking, you might not have all your data. So in that case, if you don't have all your data, we can still help you. So Madeline, if you can go to the next slide. So if you have your data, an Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it's data for the whole building, it's aggregated across resident paid and owner paid, we're set. We have a way to pull that down out of Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and we can run. For those properties where you don't have that information, if you provide us with these things, which I know that you all have, we can assign a baseline, an assumed baseline to it. And you may be wondering, where does that baseline come from? How do you know that that baseline is sort of accurate compared to like what my building is? And so what we've done is we've worked with Bright Power. If you can move to the next slide. And we have tapped into their portfolio of hundreds of thousands of buildings across the country. And what they've done is they've basically said, we're able to look through our portfolio and figure out where we have good data, whole building data on buildings, we can sort of say that based on a group of similar buildings in your area, this is likely an estimate of how much your building is using. So, specifically in Maryland, if you have a low-rise property that uses fossil fuel for heating and water heating, like there's a cluster of buildings where they have whole building data, and then we're sort of assuming that you have a similar energy use and emissions use intensity per square foot, and we can apply that to give you a sort of estimate of like where you're at as you're waiting to get your data. So you can see across your whole portfolio. Obviously, we'd all like to have real data, but it's a good sort of stopgap as you're thinking about making your plans and moving forward. All right, let's move to the next slide. Okay, and then the roadmap. So once you get your baseline, both that combination of hopefully mostly whole building real data and maybe some, estimated data based on that baseline, we can bring it into the roadmap. And the roadmap is really focused on here's where you're at now, and here's where you want to be in the future. Let's find the pathway to get there. So let's move to the next slide. So it's really about scenario planning. It's really to help you understand your progress. And for those of you who are somewhat familiar with carbon emissions, like it's fairly, even though it's like not a simple tool, it's like fairly user friendly from the standpoint of like you'll get the questions it's asking. It's not a greenhouse gas protocol reporting tool, so you can't really use this from the standpoint of like if you have that sort of reporting requirements. It's not a property level planning tool. That's why we have track three. And it's not a substitution for technical experts. So it's going to give you some thoughts around things, but it's going to give you the directions in which to pursue, not the sort of like, here is your point by point next step in all of this. Okay, next slide. So here's what we're bringing to the table over on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is what we need you to bring to the table. So your property list and your baseline energy and emissions. That comes from the calculator. So what's nice is it's an easy transfer over of like from all the data we have. You also need to know where you want to go. And that can be, I just want to comply with BEPS for the properties I have to comply with BEPS on. It can be something different. We'll work with you to help you set that, but start thinking in your mind about like where you want to go and why. And then you need to think too about how you want to think about your portfolio. Do you want to think about strategies specifically for BEPS properties separate from your other properties? Do you want to think about what you're going to do with maybe you have a cluster of senior properties. Maybe you have a cluster of properties that you're getting close to where you're going to, recapitalize or refinance or something like that. Like you have to think about how you think about your portfolio from a capital planning and or like, watch list standpoint. And then think about what you've done in the past that you think you can continue doing or things you'd like to think about doing in the future. For our SAFE members, we ask them every year, like, what are the sustainability projects you've done? And so they let us know, like, we participated in the MIHA program for 5 of our properties. We did we did like a stormwater management project. We subscribed a bunch of our members to community solar. Having that information on hand will help you understand like where you are ready to go to implement more of those same types of things. Like if you know how to use the MIHA program, like thinking through like, yeah, we can do MIHA on like a whole bunch of projects. If you haven't done MIHA before, then like maybe that's your first step, but understanding like what you've done in the past, knowing how you develop your new construction properties and what you commit to there. There's a lot of those types of things. Like you guys already know those things implicitly, but we'll have to get them down on paper, Excel, spreadsheet, that type of thing. And then what will you get? If you can move to the next slide, Madeline. So you're going to put in this information and then if you can click once more, we'll help you figure out where you're at now, where where you are for your baseline year, which for most of you, I think is going to be last year based on BEPS, um, where, um, where your target is, and then like as you do things, like as you say, I'm gonna do deep energy retrofits on these three properties, sort of where you're going and how much you're progressing to where whatever your goal is. If you can go to the next slide. We'll also show you sort of across your portfolio, are you on track? Um, and if you're not off track, or if you're not on track. And we show this both on the energy side as well as on the carbon side. We show it both by carbon emissions intensity, so how much are you using per square foot, as well as like how much you're using across your portfolio. And then this is my second to last slide. You can go to the next one. And then in addition, we'll get down to the properties. So if you said, like, of these properties that I'm thinking about refinancing, like I have a cluster of like 5 properties that I'm thinking about refinancing over the next like 5 years. Um, and I think I can do deep energy retrofits on like half of them. Then you end up with this list of properties that sort of says, here are the properties within there. Where might you want to target? You might want to target based on like emissions intensity. So you'll get to see here, like, what is the emissions intensity? And you might want to start with the one that's like has the highest emissions intensity. Or you might want to start with the one that has like the most emissions in your portfolio. It's sort of up to you where you want to start. And this will help you sort of think through, like, as you go to track 3 or anything else, like where you might want to start and why, help you make those decisions. Great. And then the last slide. So what do you need to bring to the table? A lot of this is just bringing the stuff you already have. Your goals, your questions, your concerns regarding decarbonization. Where do you feel confident? Where are you struggling? Better understand the information that you have available. So, like, do you have information on your energy utility data? Do you know where you've already done some energy efficiency efforts? What are your typical scopes looking like for rehab and new construction? Again, these are things you have probably in your head, maybe in some places across the organization, but bringing it all together. And then if you'd like us to run these tools for you, we would need information on that. So we'll walk through like exactly what and when and how, why and how, and all of that. So that's a pretty high level overview. We're flexible and we're here to meet you where you're at.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Are there
Mhm.
quick clarifying questions for Lauren before we talk about track 3 TA? And if folks want to save it for the Q&A portion, that's absolutely okay. No. Okay, so
Sorry, Madeline, you were a little soft there. You want me to start?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, got it.
sorry, the audio is being so weird for some reason.
My computer's a little slow, so it's just going to take a second. Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, we're talking about track 3. So if SAFE is going to help you figure out your portfolio, like all your buildings, our goal is trying to help you figure out a specific building or specific buildings and what kind of a scope you could create for electrification, decarbonization to meet your BEPS goals. When I love this first slide, not to get all like hippy dippy, but my coworker Joshua brought this slide in and this image in because we're all here because we want to make properties where people can live and they can be healthy and they can be safe. And it's a real challenge to keep affordable housing going. So I know that everyone is trying to figure out how to fund it, how to take care of all that natural deterioration that's happening to your properties, how to pay for upkeep, and how to keep your operations costs low. And that's our goal, is to look at one of your properties and figure out how you could actually do this decarbonization. I couldn't resist putting in a couple definitions, and so I'm going to go through a few definitions and a little bit of the theory behind what we're going to be talking about, because I feel like it's important to understand. So I really quick wanted to go through a few definitions. We talk about these things all the time, but I think it's really important for us to talk about them, as there'll be things that we'll be talking about in track 3. There's electrification, decarbonization, clean energy, and energy efficiency. These get thrown around all the time by lots of different people, but I think it's important to understand these definitions, and hopefully you guys can reference this slide later to kind of think about these different pieces, as we will be doing in track 3. And so this is the really big thing that we're probably going to be focusing a lot on. Electrification and decarbonization does not mean just swapping out one piece of equipment for another. If you don't do it correctly, if you're not dealing with building envelope, if you're not dealing with ventilation improvements, you can end up spending more money and having really uncomfortable residents and developing all kinds of problems for your property. So our goal is to help people understand what responsible electrification could look like for a property and what you need to do to get there, and then how you would fund it. So in track 3, we're going to be thinking about everything as a kind of the building as a system, all of the pieces that have to go into electrification and decarbonization. And I think it's important for people's organizations to understand these concepts so that they are helping their development teams and their contractors make good choices for their buildings. And I'm just going to take a little sidetrack to talk about why we talk about electrification so much. I think this is really powerful, and I want to make sure everyone understands this. This is an example of hot water usage in a building. If you have, this is the amount of hot water, the energy that is needed to heat hot water in a building. If you use a highly efficient gas water heater, you will actually use more energy than will go into the water being heated, because it's only 95% efficient, right? So you lose that 5% efficiency. If you use a heat pump water heater instead, you're only going to use 2.8 million BTUs. So this is why everyone's pushing this electrification initiative so hard, is because of the extreme reduction in energy that can be achieved with electric equipment because of heat pump technology mostly. So I just wanted to put that in to make sure everybody had a chance to see that and understand that, because I think that's really important. And as you are thinking about your properties and decisions you make for your properties, I think it's an important thing to understand. So we're going to be just in track 3 talking about how to decarbonize your property and how you might fund that. Like, how are you actually going to make it happen? We're going to look at all different types of things in your property, but it's an off-site audit. We're not going to come out to your property and look at it directly. We're going to be looking at the information you can collect for us, and then we're going to be helping to create a preliminary scope that you can think about when you're providing upgrades. I'm going to just do a quick example. This is an example in Baltimore, owned by Episcopal Housing. So this is a 1972 garden style apartments. I'm sure most of you guys own something like this, as it's a super common housing type. But we made recommendations and kind of prioritize them. So upgrade your lighting, put controls on your lighting. These are the low-hanging fruit, things in priority 1. Then for priority 2, we suggested they upgrade the electrical service, replace the gas water heater with an electric resistance water heater. They could not fit a heat pump water heater. And they needed to do additional ventilation and then work on air sealing and insulation. And then all the way here in priority 3, they got to replacing the gas furnace and AC with a heat pump system. So the key is that you don't start with this way back up here, because you're going to spend a lot of money and have a really unhappy group of tenants for sure. And probably you, because you're probably paying some common area bills that you're not going to like. So these are the kind of recommendations we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about things for your specific properties. These are the people that need to be involved in this process. So we need a representative from ownership. We need people from building management to building maintenance to help us understand what's actually happening at the property management, asset management, accounting, because if you need to know anything about your bills or your energy use, that's going to probably be your accounting department, and then your property development team. If you don't have all of these people, if there's just one of you or just a couple of you, that's okay. If you have a bigger organization, please pull these people in. And I'm going to talk about kind of what we're going to need from you guys. I'm going to show you guys an example property sheet. Here we go. This is the property information sheet we're asking people to fill out to do this technical assistance. It has basics about the property. We're going to talk a little bit about your financing. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. Basic information about how many stories, what type of population do you have living there. This sheet has drop downs. The drop downs are really hard to see, but there are drop downs with information. When you're looking at it on your computer, it's easier to see. And then we get into some specifics about your property, about like what kind of heating, is it centralized, is it decentralized? Questions about ventilation. So you're going to have someone who knows something about the property to actually answer questions about answer questions. What we usually find is no one can fill this out completely remotely, but if you can fill it out as best as possible, usually having building maintenance from that building fill it out is usually the most effective solution. But this is the document that we're asking you guys to fill out. Then I can show you guys an example of the final product. We're going to give you a PDF with preliminary scope recommendations. This isn't the same as an energy audit. If you do this and you want to apply for programs or you want to have work done, you're still going to need to have an energy audit, but you might be able to figure out if this is a good property to do an energy audit on. So there's a basic property data about the property. And then we talk about your critical needs, things to do load reduction, systems to be replaced, renewable energy options, things you could do for resiliency for your property. And then we will provide a guide about different types of energy audits and what you might want to get and why. And then we have a whole list of resources you can have. We're also going to be connecting this to the funding opportunities in Maryland. For example, for the property I just talked about, St. Stephen's, I'm going the wrong way. For St. Stephen's, we were able to connect them to the idea of MIHA and also the MEA programs that are available. So we did a lot of conversation about the different funding for those options. Sorry. Here's the process. This is kind of the property review process. We're thinking August through October. The dates might move a little bit based on how the timeline of the grant and track 2 goes and track 1. But the first stage is information gathering. We'll meet, we'll talk about your goals, we'll gather property information. You guys will gather property information and get us back to us. We'll do a review of all that information, and then we're going to meet again to kind of talk about where we are, what we're looking at, what additional information we might need. And then we'll do a final review with you over our recommendations for the property and talk about what the next steps are. Like, oh, for this property, it makes a lot of sense for you to go ahead and apply for MIHA. Or maybe for another property, it makes sense just to hold off and wait for some reason. Depending on each scenario, there could be a lot of different next steps. This is really wordy, but there's some properties that work better than others for this type of technical assistance. You don't have to have an official affordable housing designation. We're not looking for like an agreement, or you don't have to be HUD, you don't have to be LIHTC. If you have at least 5 units, it usually works best. Properties smaller than that are challenging to do a thorough evaluation of, and they're getting closer to single family homes, which is a little bit of a different analysis. Your properties using fossil fuels like natural gas, oil, or are a big benefit, and then electric baseboard heat as well. If you go through track 2 and then come out with some properties that have really high greenhouse gas emissions, if you pull one of those and have us go through one of those, that's likely to be a really good candidate. If you're already in the middle of a refinance, or you already have a plan for a refinance, it's probably too late to do this type of technical assistance. We recommend that you're going to be going through a refinance in 2 to 5 years, or you want to do a slow over time plan. Those are good times to do this type of technical assistance. If you have a set work plan, you're just going to make everybody in your organization really mad when you try and make last minute changes and mess with the funding deal. So I would recommend that you try to be planning a little farther out. If you think you have to comply with BEPS, or if you're not sure, we're happy to look at that and help you with that. And then this is the multifamily properties that are not funded through tax credits, but are hoping to make upgrades gradually over time. We usually call that a 0 over time plan. If you're thinking about something like that, you want to take a long time to get there. This is also a good track for you to think about. And we'll talk about all those goals in the beginning. And that is everything from me. So I'm going to stop sharing. Madeline, do you want to open it for questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Folks are welcome to come off mute and ask questions, or you can put them in the chat, whatever's easiest. If folks are typing, I'll just quickly plug that we had our post kickoff survey where we asked everyone to indicate which track they wanted to participate in. If after this presentation you have questions, or you want to change your response, maybe you want to do everything now, or now that you've seen kind of what data is needed and what the process will look like, you want to change to track 2 or track 3, you can email Alex Jara with SAHF for track 2 questions, or to opt into track 2, and Rebecca with New Ecology if you want to opt into track 3 or have questions about track 3. And when I send out the follow-up email with today's resources, I'll include their email CC'd, so it's easy to reach out to them. And Rebecca also put her email in the chat. So Alex, thank you both. No questions. They covered everything perfectly, and everyone feels in a great spot to get started now.
No feedback whatsoever. Is anyone really angry?
Yes, Lindsay, you can do all the tracks if you think that's a good fit for your properties. I think Rebecca made a good point, and Lauren mentioned this too. maybe you don't know where to start, so you want to do track two with Alex and Lauren just to figure out how your portfolio is performing. And then from that priority list that Lauren and Alex will help you put together, you can pick out one or two properties to then take to the new Ecology team, and they can make help you do the preliminary scopes of work with track three. And we've tried to get the timeline set up in a way that you can kind of start with track two and then phase into track three once you start to get the data from SAFE's tools. Yeah, that totally makes sense, Judy. One-on-one conversations. And that's the purpose of those kind of kickoff calls with both TA providers to kind of figure out where you're at, what are your goals, what are your immediate questions and needs unique to your properties.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think we in general need to touch base about how we're gonna set up so that you guys, like in the past, I've used things like our Calendly so that you can pick a time that works well for you. And I imagine we might do something like that, Madeline, to like let people sort of start scheduling things.
Perfect. Yeah, so we'll circle around that information, Denise and everyone, so you can start the process of the kickoff calls with SAFE for track two.
Yeah, and that should happen fairly quickly. Obviously, we all have some summer vacations and things coming up, but we'll set it up so that you guys can pretty quickly, like in the next couple of weeks, start to put that meeting on your calendar as you're available.
Yeah, and we've scheduled TA to go through the fall, just to give you all flexibility to work with your teams to collect data on the back end. And, we know summer is really busy with vacations, everything, and just life in general. So to account for that flexibility. Um, just in case anyone else is typing, I just want to quickly have a reminder for our upcoming webinar. July 3rd, it's going to be is that a Thursday? It's a Thursday. The day before 4th of July. We're working with MDE to have a webinar on BEPS. So if you have covered properties and you just want to figure out what are the next steps, what you have to do, this is a great opportunity. We're also going to have someone from the NHT team, our director of portfolio sustainability, present on a case study of, a scope of work that he's helped put together at one of our properties that would, in theory, be a BEPS compliant scope of work. So you can get an idea of what types of measures might be going into compliance work in Maryland. And then in July, we're also going to have some more case studies that kind of just walk through clean energy retrofit best practices, and we'll talk through funding opportunities in Maryland and at the federal level as well. Any other last minute questions or comments from our presenters? Awesome. Well, we can all get 15 minutes back to our morning. I'll send a follow-up email with the session recording and the slide deck, as well as the TA provider's email. So you can start asking those one-on-one questions, and then be on the lookout for any communication about scheduling kickoff calls for your preferred TA track. But thank you so much, Rebecca, Lauren, and Alex, for being here with us this morning, and for all our participants. We'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.